Could you give a brief outline of your latest book, Amatore's Restaurant?
Well, the story takes the form of a collection of narratives from different characters, where they each describe an episode of an earlier sexual experience in the form of a flashback. It's either at the beginning of an affair or a brief sexual encounter. The theme of the book is seduction.
Your characters are linked together through their association with the Recreative Theatre Company. Did you originally write the stories as separate short stories?
Yes, I did. Originally, I had the idea of describing a variety of sexual situations with different people's experience and focused my writing on this. It was pornography, if you like. But then I started to become more interested in the characters involved, their motives, their approach to seduction. From the point of view of the instigator of the affair, that's the seducer, or also from the point of view of the person who is being enticed into the relationship.
So how did you go about bringing them together into one novel?
Yeah, well, that was the tricky, but that was the difficult bit first. The characters wrote about in the episodes came from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and many from different countries, other countries. I had to try and think of a situation where they could be brought together. So, as a musician, I've worked with theatre groups in the past, and many of the characters I'd invented for my stories seem to be similar to the personalities you'd come across in the casts of theatre groups. So that solved the problem of finding a connection between my characters. However, I was still left with the personalities who didn't fit as actor types.
Oh yes, like for instance I could think of Pierre, or Freya, Colette, for instance.
Right. Yeah, those three. And there are a few others as well. But once I decided on the setting for the story, that's the dinner at the restaurant, it was much easier then because I could give my remaining characters the job of working as the staff of the restaurant. And some could be invited guests of the actors who were at the dinner. It was a roundabout way of approaching the structure of a book. Not my usual approach anyway, I admit, but it was a valuable exercise all the same.
So all the episodes in this book started out as a collection of short stories then?
Yeah, they did. I wrote most of them over 10 years ago. They've been on the shelf, as you know, and I've only started reworking them as a novel about a year ago.
So the theme of your book is seduction, with a focus on the motives behind seduction.
Exactly, yeah.
For instance, we see Mario tricked in the Venetian.
That's right.
Also Pierre in Blind Man's Bluff. And Dale is seduced by the manipulative Nicole in La Belle Charente.
That's right.
You obviously show there are many different motives for seduction, but do you think there are still some left to explore?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are. You mentioned Mario, the restaurant proprietor. So he's being cajoled into having sex with Chiara, his wife's lover. This is an attempt to convince her that Mario is a serial womanizer. So that's one motive. There is also the motive of revenge, which Lucy Sutton takes out on Rose, her neighbour. She entices the gorgeous Swede, Joran, to give her a massage in full view of the neighbour's garden. So that's the reason for her seducing him. And there are other motives as well. The desire for attention, greed or financial gain, envy, seeking power or control over somebody, and even genuine attraction for another person. All of these are featured in the book. But to answer the second question, yeah, I'm sure there are many more motives to explore.
And I notice your book is set in many different locations, including Venice, Amsterdam, Berlin, Spain,
Brazil.
France, Brazil, and the UK, of course. Have you been to all of these places, and has travel played an important part in your life? And do you feel it's necessary for an author to have visited the places they write about? Or is it possible to rely purely on imagination, do you think?
There few questions there. I mean, I have been very lucky I have lived in many countries, as well as here in France. So that gives me an advantage in a way when I'm writing about other cultures and foreign settings, particularly. But to answer the second part of your question, no, I don't. I really don't think it's essential to have visited a place you're writing about, particularly when there's so much information you can get on the internet these days. I know some authors who describe their locations really convincingly without ever having been there. However, in this book, I have lived in, or at least visited, all the places featured in the stories. Oh, all that except one, that is. I haven't been to Berlin, so the story set there, I've had to do quite a research on that.
Well, I have been to Berlin, and I have
me.
to say that your portrayal is very accurate.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Well, I didn't have to put much about the location in the book anyway, but...
Well, I'd now like to read a couple of extracts from your book.
Good.
The first is from the chapter called The Waitress's Bus Stop, where you describe the streets of Amsterdam. Yeah,
this is the story where Freya has been left alone in Amsterdam after her husband has gone, and she's stranded there. And at the beginning of the story, are you reading the
yes.
first part here? Well, this is where she's just coming back from the library, Central Library, on her own, and she's feeling quite lonely, and she stops outside a cafe, tempted to go in. Yeah.
Tuesday the 10th of October, one of those autumn days when the cold comes in from the east to stake its claim on the city. She had been making her way back from the library and paused outside the cafe bar on Herrengracht. She shivered and pulled up her collar. Along the tree-lined canal a sharp wind stole the leaves, now turned red and brown, and carried them across the cobbled streets to a quiet resting place in the doorways of the narrow gabled houses. It was 6 weeks to the day since that last call from Michael, and despite the cold, she was in no hurry to return to her empty apartment.
Yeah.
Oh well, yes, I remember autumn. Yeah, when autumn. I went to Amsterdam, it used to get very cold.
It was, yeah. The winter's awful, I mean, it's really cold compared with England and France particularly.
You also described the French countryside in La Belle-Charente.
This is a story of Dale. He's in between courses at his college, and he's just hanging around at home. So his mother, getting fed up of him staying in bed all day, basically decides that he should go and visit his uncle in France. He's not been to France before, so he agrees to go along with the idea, thinking there'll be lots of girls there to sort of to meet up with, and he's heard about French girls, and
he's quite often,
he certainly is disappointed.
My uncle announced that we had arrived at our destination. Well, almost. The village of Dirac had 2 narrow streets of grey cement-faced buildings secured with dull brown shutters and roofed with ochre tiles. I was convinced the place was deserted. No local girls promenading the streets, only an old man walking his mangy dog along the shaded side of the road. The drive through the village of Dirac took a total of 13 seconds.
Well, yeah, the countryside down there in Charente can be quite barren compared with here up in Brittany. I mean, it's really it can be quite dry, particularly in summer.
And the town doesn't sound very interesting.
Barren, yeah. People have basically deserted the place. Yeah.
There are many different